This is Fragmented Reality, a digital bulletin podcast designed to bust the buzzwords that dominate enterprise technology. In this episode, Daniel Brigham shares a clutch of eggs, each containing an industry buzzword, with Green Flag's CTO Shakeel Butt and the company's Chief Product Manager, Jeremy Bristow.
So Jez, if you wouldn't mind picking the first egg and cracking it open, please.
No problem, I'll go with green.
Going for green.
What have we got? Silos.
Silos then. So what do silos mean to you, and why do they kind of keep causing problems in IT?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can do. Probably the more political side of it from my perspective. So when I think of silos, based on current experience in sort of Green Flag and Direct Line Group, I think for me it's really about probably two things. One is the lack of collaboration and cooperation, and the second would be the impact it has on the delivery. So I think it's not uncommon for a large organisation that has multiple sort of business units, departments, and functions. You're trying to deliver a technology transformation that might not necessarily encompass the entire organisation, and it's quite often then that you will come up against teams and departments that will not deliberately but inadvertently be acting as a silo, and that can be quite challenging because then you end up in a situation where you're actually infighting to try and get your goal, your objective delivered, which can be tricky because then you've got the complexities of politics and I guess agendas at play. That can be hard. I think the other side of silos, when I think of that word, is probably more from a personal experience on the Green Flag transformation that we're delivering, is actually trying to get multiple Scrum teams inside one program to actually collaborate effectively. And this is not because people don't want to or they don't know how to. It's just if you have a collection of teams that each own their own platform as a self-contained product, it can be very quick and very easy to get comfortable with just focusing on your own product and actually forgetting that we're part of a much bigger distributed system. And sometimes there might be things that we're going to do which will be at odds with what other teams are doing, and that's definitely been, I think, for me, a bit of a learning curve in our implementation of scaled agile that we didn't necessarily foresee at the beginning.
I think for me, so we've had to work harder during the pandemic to break down silos, particularly within our internal teams. So the famous or infamous things people say are the chats at the water coolers, wandering over to someone's desk, all of that's gone now. So where the informal communication that you would have between teams, quick chats, what do you think of this? Oh, I'm doing this. Oh, do you know about this? All of that's gone now. Everything's a formal meeting. It has to be booked in. It has to be scheduled. So I think we've had to work really hard, even harder during the pandemic, to break down silos to make sure that teams are communicating effectively with each other. We've had to find new ways to do that.
That's interesting, and it's obviously such a dirty word now, silos, but
Yeah.
Is there any advantage to it? People just going off in their own teams and coming up with concepts themselves and then presenting it to other teams, or does it need that collaborative approach?
So I think when you're at ideation stage, it's working in silos probably a good thing because there's no distraction, and I'm a massive advocate of getting 2, 3, 4 small team of people. Here's the problem. They can go away and try and solve that problem. I think the challenge of working in silos is then when you move from ideation into, delivery of that. If people don't understand how you're trying to solve the problem, or you've not communicated that effectively, then you are trying to then go off in a silo a little bit, and people, because they're not aware of what you're doing or how you've solved the problem, it goes against the collaborative model that we want to try and implement.
Yeah, I agree. I think that my slightly different perspective on it is that I think there's probably a nod to the notion of, moderation. So I think, to your point, is having a certain amount of siloed, a siloed attitude towards the work that you're doing at the right point in time is not unhealthy.
Yeah.
I think there is also a case to be made around when it's applicable and when it's not, and actually what principles you can put in place to allow the teams to enjoy the benefits of being siloed, which is that actually you're not dependent on anybody. There's no, you've got full autonomy and empowerment to just get on with it, versus actually, no, there's a piece of work that you're doing that's now going to impact another team. So at this point, you need to now sort of communicate. So for me, I think it's a little bit like a needle that sort of swings from left to right, as to depending on the scenario and the use case.
Cool. Okay, I think, it's probably Shaq's turn to crack open the next egg then. Which colour are you going to go for?
I'm going to go for blue.
Okay. What have we got in the blue egg?
Long word.
Wow.
What have we got?
Digital transformation.
Now then, that's the biggie really, isn't it? So, I mean, people talk about digital transformation a lot. People also talk about digital disruption a lot. What's the sort of key differences between the two, and how do you apply digital transformation?
So I've got a small confession here. This is becoming one of the phrases or statements that is starting to become offensive to me.
I can see you're riled up.
Yeah, it's the problem is it's a little bit like agile. Everybody's using it, and eventually it will lose its meaning because of that, and it's being applied to everything and anything.
Yeah.
I think what does digital actually mean, and what did that mean 5 years ago compared to what it means today? Who knows? And then the transformation, fine, we understand what that phrase means as, I guess, a statement of intent. But for me, I guess my perspective on digital transformation is more about the outcome that you get from it. So it's about actually, again, lots of cliches here, putting the customer first, or putting them at the centre of what you're doing. And that customer could be an external, actual, genuine consumer customer, or it could be an internal user, depending on what the platform is or whatever it is that you're transforming. So it's about putting them first. I think it's about experience and focusing on the experience rather than actually on the technology. And I think it's about having capability. So sometimes you'll see digital transformation as a means to an end.
Yeah.
But actually, really, it's not we've taken a process that was offline and we've now put it online. We've completed a digital transformation. No, it's actually, we're fundamentally changing the way that we're going to be running whatever that is going forward. So is it actually a means to an end, or is it a complete complete paradigm shift of how you actually do that service or deliver that product?
So you're saying it's a cultural shift rather than...
Yeah. So, if I take Green Flag as an example, so in my head, the digital transformation that we are delivering is actually to turn Green Flag from a rescue business into a technology business that happens to do rescue.
Yeah.
And that, the reason for, I guess, for me, categorizing the transformation in that way in my head is because that helps me to remember that actually technology, for us to become a technology business that happens to do rescue, it means whatever I build has to be capable of pivoting with the business whenever the business wants, at the pace that the business wants.
Yeah. So for me, I'm with you. Digital transformation, everyone's doing it. It almost has become like a bit of a, it's certainly a buzzword. The way I kind of think of it is, and this comes from, I can't claim this is mine, but this comes from our head of UX in Green Flag, and I think sums it up really well, is if you imagine a Venn diagram of 3 circles. So in the top circle, you've got technology, because clearly to deliver a digital transformation, you've got to have the underlying technology platform. And then the next circle, you've got customer or user experience, and then in the third circle, you've got business. And I don't think you get successful business transformation unless you hit that sweet spot where all 3 circles overlap in the middle. Because how many times have you downloaded an app and you think, oh, this looks cool, have a play with it, and then either delete it straight away because you think, well, that's actually nowhere near as exciting as I was led to believe, or you just never use it again. And to me, so they've gone through a digital transformation, they've launched an app, but what they haven't probably thought about is the business aspects, so how am I monetizing this? But most importantly, I haven't thought about the user experience. There's no reason for me to come back as a customer, so they haven't got that sweet spot where all 3 circles overlap. And to me, that's the really crucial bit.
Yeah, it's a great point. And that for me that signifies the different components or ingredients, if you will, that typically could make up a digital transformation. You've got user experience, you've got business need, you've got customer experience, customer need, you've got technology, you've got culture and mindset, you've got talent, process. All of these things, typically can sit under the umbrella of digital transformation.
Yeah.
So it's kicked off silos, which is slightly negative connotations for you guys, and now digital transformation has got slightly kind of sort of shrug your shoulders about it now, unless you get it absolutely right. So maybe the third one or third egg will be able to bring us something a bit more positive.
So we'll go
Which
with
colour are you going to go
something
for?
pink.
Something pink.
Oh, it's a long one.
Who have we got, Jez?
What, digital evangelist?
Now then, have either of you ever called yourselves digital evangelists?
Well, I would call my learning colleague to my left a digital evangelist.
But Shaq, would you call yourself a digital evangelist?
Because if I ever did call myself that, I would want you to throw me out the window.
No. And also, would you call him that positively as well?
Yeah.
Or?
So I guess in all seriousness, so what Shaq's really focused on is using technology to deliver a business outcome. When I think of the word evangelist, I think of someone who does a lot of talking, but very little doing, and delivers very little outcome. But they are an SME and an expert in the subject, in this case of digital.
Yeah.
And where I guess we're really fortunate to have Shaq as our CTO is he can talk till the cows come home about technology, and trust me, we have spent many a long evening talking about technology, and
those cows have very much come home.
Well, yeah. But I guess what Shaq also does for us, though, is make sure that the technology choices we're making deliver a sound business outcome and a sound customer outcome. So to me, evangelists have their place, and if you want to educate people around what digital means and what digital could be and what the future could look like, perfect. In the terms of a digital transformation, you probably don't need too many digital evangelists. You need someone who knows what they're talking about. But you need someone who can get it done as well.
Is it not just like a Silicon Valley way of saying leadership, just being a digital leader?
So it's an interesting one, I think. So thank you for the kind comments.
You're welcome.
I think that it's the evangelist phrase that's throwing me, because there's a connotation in my head around sort of what I think the definition of an evangelist is, and it's very much to what you've said, someone who talks a lot but does very little.
Yep.
I think I've met and watched a couple of evangelists that in very, very large global businesses. Now that's an interesting scenario where, for me, I think there is a value to having an evangelist where you've got an organisation that is so vast and so disparate or distributed that actually, in helping to get the message out to drive change or transformation, it's helpful to have champions who are evangelizing that message. So I think in that scenario, it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
In an organisation where, and again, drawing from personal experience, looking at Green Flag, we're quite a nicely compact organisation, business unit, I would say.
Oh, we're very lean. Yeah.
And we're not necessarily in a place where there's a lot of influencing that needs to be done first to win the hearts and minds before you get on with the journey. Actually, for us, we know what we've got to do. There's a clear goal, clear target. We've got a very straight talking MD. We've got a very straight talking leadership team that we are part of. We know what the target is. We know what the goal is. We can see the size of the prize. Can we get on, please? And let's get there and grab it. So, quite interesting. I think the slightly negative connotation, I think, from our perspective, the two of us, is coming from the fact that I think we are builders as opposed to talkers, if you were to classify us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if I can ask you, Shaq, Green Flag's digital evangelist, to crack open the fourth egg.
Oh my goodness! Right. Okay. Let's go for what colour? Let's go for a yellow.
Yellow.
We've not had yellow. Right.
What have we got in our yellow egg?
Oh my goodness. Omnichannel.
Omnichannel. Now then. So the aim of, from my point of view, the aim of an omnichannel is to make every relationship with the customers much more streamlined. Is that how you view it?
Can we take this one to start with?
Can I just say there's a wry smile from Shaq
Yeah.
here.
So omnichannel to me, in its simplest form, is being able to interact with a customer in the channel they want to interact with you in its absolute simplest form, but also that they could stop that interaction halfway through in one channel, and then they want to pick up that interaction as though it just carries on for the second half in a different channel.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the really hard bit. You can have multiple different channels to interact with customer, whether it's through social, through web chat, through the phone, through app, through WhatsApp, however, all of the standard communication channels. But the really hard bit is, can you pick up a conversation with a customer where they left off in a different channel? And I think from my personal experience, there are very few organisations out there that have cracked that bit of omnichannel.
Is that simply because the tools don't exist yet?
I think it's one of those things where there's so many different ways now to interact with an organisation. So through social media, and even within social media, there are so many different types of social media. I think it's hard sometimes for organisations to keep up with all of the different ways that all of the different demographics of customer want to interact with you with, because the way that my mum would want to interact with an organisation versus my sister are two very, very different things.
So is it the case that the technology has to catch up with the aspirations still then? Is the technology not quite there for it?
No, I don't think it is. I smiled at the beginning when I saw this phrase because this one really does wind me up. I think my issue with this is it feels like it's a buzzword that some sales or marketing person came up with that they could shove into a PowerPoint presentation to bamboozle a customer when they're trying to sell them the next version of snake oil or whatever it is. And why do I need to have a word that doesn't mean anything to explain something that Jez has very eloquently explained at the very beginning, which is that we want to be able to service our customers in the way that they want to be serviced at the point of time when they want to be serviced. I want to today, right now, I want to talk to you on the phone. In 2 hours' time, I might want to continue the conversation via a text message or via an email because I can't talk on the phone because I'm on the train home. And then tomorrow morning, I'd like to get a letter come through to confirm whatever it is that I've engaged with you on, so that I've got that in writing that I can file away. Now, that to me is very simple, and actually, I think by creating a buzzword, we've created a level of complexity that then turns something into something else. Because the number of times I've had sales or marketing people use omnichannel at me to mean different things. It's like, don't complicate it, please. We need to simplify. And I think if we can land a rocket on the moon, how on earth can us being able to track conversations with a customer over the phone, via email and by post, for example, be outside the ability for us to be able to achieve? That just makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I think for me, this is about businesses prioritising what's important and what's not important. And I think it's about poor technology choices that don't actually work well together to create that omnichannel experience.
Okay, let's move on to the fifth and final one. So, which colour, Jez?
Good one.
Pressure.
Green's my favourite.
That's better than sighing.
Agile.
Right. Well, we talked about silos, so I guess this is kind of creating better collaboration between different teams. Is it? Is that how you look at agile?
So I think
Shaq's laughing again.
He is. So again, I think agile's become a bit of a buzzword. But to me, the true meaning of agile is empowered teams, and by empowered, what I mean is, so you've got a set of principles, and you almost create some guardrails for those teams to say, anywhere between these two lines, you can operate. If you start to get close to one of those two lines, then we need to have a conversation. But feel empowered that as long as you don't break those principles, you can generally just crack on with it.
So that's been too agile then, going over those two barriers.
Yeah, because I mean, we work in a financial services organisation. Green Flag is part of Direct Line Group, and so agile is great because it creates empowerment. It gives teams autonomy to be able to get on and deliver. The fact that you are, whenever you're doing something, you're delivering in a matter of weeks because you're not trying to absolutely perfect something. You want to create something that's good enough, get it live, learn from it, iterate and improve. And as long as you're doing that in a matter of weeks, even if you fail, that's not a bad thing, because you've only wasted a number of weeks. You've probably learned quite a lot in those number of weeks about ways of working. You've learnt about the outcomes. It's taught you something that if it hasn't worked, okay, well, we won't do that next time, but at least now we know, and the next one's likely to be more successful as a result of it. But again, in a regulated industry, within a financial service organisation, you clearly need to make sure that you give people enough room to play, but you have those guardrails to make sure that that if someone was to go and step outside of those guardrails, you've got the right governance and control in place to make sure that it's not going to be a disaster as a result of it. And to me, to be agile means that you can react, means that you can pivot, means that you can change, means that you don't have to have everything set in stone, and you can, as long as you know enough, get on with it and then learn as you go. So I think that the principles of agile are fantastic and completely align with me as an individual.
Yeah, and I think some really great insight from as chief product manager. I think it's really interesting and quite fascinating that your lens and your insight is very much aligned with your job role and what you're here to do. The guardrails. Making sure that prioritisation is always focused on, so it's great. I think to build on what you've said, Jez, at a philosophical level, I'm probably I'd probably align it a little bit, and this might sound a little bit naff, but my worry for agile is probably best explained as an analogy, looking at sort of religion. So from the experiences that I've had, you've got lots of different perspectives of agile based on the individual role or the, I guess, your experience of agile. So what you've just explained, everything is of course based on your role and your experience of it, which is, it's great. But I guess if someone is involved in an agile transformation that's perhaps not executed correctly, or doesn't necessarily follow the principles correctly. So in other words, your implementation of the scripture is not correct or flawed. I've seen implementations of agile where I've talked to people and they've said things and I've listened and thought, oh my gosh, I wouldn't be doing that, and that doesn't sound very agile. And you hear these things and you don't say anything because it's impolite, but you take on the understanding and the insight and you draw a conclusion. And I guess that's my big worry for agile, is that I think if it's done correctly, it can be amazing. If it's not, then it can be worse than a more traditionally run sort of waterfall type project. And what happens, and then you've got everything in between. And of course then anyone who's involved with any of these implementations will draw their conclusion about that. And they'll either assume that that's how it is, that's how it always is, or this is actual complete rubbish. And all of this then leads to quite a complex, I guess, opinion in the end of what I think of agile, and whether I think it's right and how it works. There's been times in Direct Line Group where I've had conversations with people who've said agile just doesn't work, and it's like, okay, that's fine, or we've got to use agile for every project, and it's like, no, that's not right either. It's not the answer to every question. And yes, of course, there will be certain types of scenarios where agile's not applicable, but yeah, it's a complicated one. I think having been involved in bringing agile into Direct Line Group, as part of the digital department, and then moving into Green Flag and implementing scaled agile for enterprise, our SAFe implementation, I think there's been a lot of experience and learning from this. And we've had scenarios where we've talked to sort of very senior executives who recognise the value of it, but haven't necessarily had the time to invest to actually understand it and embrace it. And so for them, it's just yeah, guys, I get it. This is just something that this is a way of doing it that you guys like to do. Fine, sprint, schmid, doesn't matter. Just go on and get it delivered. And it's like, okay, that's fine. So it's quite interesting. I'm a believer of agile. I think it is great if it's done correctly. I think it can be transformational for organisations and for individuals. It does break down silos. It is very outcome focused. There is an element of predictable, reliable delivery that you get from it. But there are so many nuances and I guess opportunities for it to bend out of shape, that then it really does sort of it requires a lot of attention and tinkering with. You can't just kick off a number of meetings that you call stand-ups and sprint plannings and retrospectives and say, yeah, it's done, we're up and running. It doesn't work like that.
And so on that philosophical note there, Shaq and Jez, thank you very much for your insights, and thank you very much for coming on Fragmented Reality.
Thank you
very much.
Power up your day with the Bulletin Brief, the latest news, insights and opinion delivered straight to your inbox.